Hello, class. So here we have our CLC presentation on class stress and health, made by this wonderful group here.
Okay, so anyways, what this article is about is it was a study, and their goal was to see how progressive muscle relaxation exercises affected clinical stress and burnout among student nursing interns. In order to do this, they used a randomized control trial group design, and also interns were also assigned to either the control group or the experimental group. And students in the EG also took the PMRE. And so yeah, both groups were given a personal information form, which is the burnout measure short version, or also known as the BMS, and the physio-psychosocial response scale, also known as the PPSRS for nursing students. And the post-test scores showed that there was a big difference across groups. The EG post-test scores on the BMS, PPSRS, and the subscales were lower than those of the CG. And the PMRE training was found to reduce burnout and PPSR to stress in nursing students during clinical practice.
Now, to start our presentation, the name of the study is The Effect of Progressive Muscle Relaxation Exercise on Clinical Stress and Burnout in Student Nurse Interns. During their internship, many students tend to experience burnout. According to the Mayo Clinic, this is where they get a state of physical or emotional exhaustion that can lead a sense of reduce excuse me to a sense of reducing the accomplishments and to a loss of personality. Burnout can be the cause of many mental health disorders and illnesses like depression. Nursing students tend to be at a high risk of burnout, especially during clinical internships. Therefore, the purpose of the study we covered was aiming to determine the effects of progressive muscle relaxation exercises at an attempt to see how effective they were on the effects of clinical stress and burnout. And as you can see, the population was student nurse interns within this study. Reduce, excuse me, to a sense of reducing the accomplishments and to a loss of personality. Burnout can be the cause of many mental health disorders and illnesses like depression. Nursing students tend to be at a high risk of burnout, especially during clinical internships. Therefore, the purpose of the study we covered was aiming to determine the effects of progressive muscle relaxation exercises at an attempt to see how effective they were on the effects of clinical stress and burnout. And as you can see, the population was student nurse interns within this study. Now that we know a little bit of the study, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the study. Paulette and his contributing experimenters and authors took the approach of a true experimental design. Their independent variables were the muscle relaxation exercises effect on their dependent variables, which were clinical stress and burnout levels. The way that they were able to measure their variables were through the burnout measure short version survey and the socio-psychosocial response scale. The scale was a Likert scale. I do want to note that although I have it all cohesive on the board, as one hypothesis, this study had two. They separated clinical stress levels and burnout into separate categories. Therefore, they had two hypotheses, one for their clinical stress levels and one for burnout. This is good to know, as when reading the study, they refer to both of them separately. To further elaborate, the experimenters gathered 100 people per group However, some of the participants were excluded due to the voluntary withdrawal or other circumstances. This concluded in 67 students participating in the experimental group and 78 students participating in the controlled group. Procedures were still kept and continued after the exclusion of certain participants. The duration of the implementation stage was over 100 days, but the intervention only lasted 3 weeks during clinical rotations. It's important to note that these participants in the experimental group were well trained and well informed on the techniques that they were to perform for 30 minutes for 3 weeks. Now that we know what our study is, let's get to the results. The results confirmed the two hypotheses that I stated earlier. It was documented that the experimental group had significant changes between their pretest and post-test scores, both of the skills used to measure clinical stress and burnout. Meanwhile, the control group's pre-test and post-test scores were not statistically significantly different. The experimenters pointed out that in the study, the majority of participants were female and that there was still no statistically significant changes between the groups based on age or gender. It could be concluded that progressive muscle relaxation exercises are effective on levels of clinical stress and burnout. This opens doors for further research and applications when looking between the experimental group and the control group.
This slide is on the significance and real-world application. So the question is asking to discuss the results and considerations for real-world application and explaining broader issues such as politically or socially. On the slide, I listed some examples, how the study's significance is derived and aimed towards seeing how the muscle relaxation exercise overall has had a tremendous effect on nurse interns, as well as how the real-world application can make a comparison between nurse interns and college students. And then on the slide, I also put how the study didn't have a differentiation in scores based on the gender, but it did prove the hypothesis correct. So some other examples of broader issues raised by the study, whether that be socially or politically, the study that our group did focus on was the burnout and clinical stress amongst nursing student interns. I would compare this group of people in a way that it relates socially to a certain organization or a group of people, that being the college students. College students constantly face routines and deadlines and various tasks that can cause things such as distress and even anxiety. Stress can also damage social relationships in the family and the social environment overall. It may even lead to a decrease in the productivity level of a person. So hence, this can both have an effect on nursing interns and college students equally.
Future replication. How can the study be replicated with adjustments in the future? I believe the location could be different. In the research, they had chose a geology and obstetrician clinic. I did butcher that and I apologize. You have more of a clinical room rather than a serene room where, it could be more of a de-stressor, warm candles, just warm lighting rather than, like bright hospital lights, I also believe that the study could be done not only on nursing students, but many majors. And I believe that some of the research could be compared to one another and see, which major has more stress, or, what else are we missing? I believe that we can still figure out, what differentiates the majors and the stress level of that. I believe that people have different walks of life. Um, and I believe that the major you choose can come with different type of stressors. I also believe what could be changed in the future is the way that they connected. So they connected through an app called WhatsApp, and I don't believe that that was very confidential. You know, I think that it was an easy way to get connected, but I don't believe that it was a secure or safe place where you can, talk to your audience. Um, these interns, it was easy to talk to them on WhatsApp, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to share everything on that app because you don't really feel secure. I think that another form of communication could have been used. These are just some adjustments that I thought, would better um, the research. The location, change of location could change, the data. The change of major students could, add on to it. And then I don't believe the WhatsApp was reliable.
Okay, this is slide 9, and next up I'm talking about the IRB involvement and the role and purpose of the Institutional Review Board in social psychological research. And so basically, in social psychological research, it's used to assess a number of critical considerations, including participant safety and independence from compulsion, meaning they're there to make sure that the participants aren't being aren't being forced to be involved in whatever study is being done, and also they're there to see what the benefits or possible dangers of the study are. Potential study outcomes include improved physical and mental health, as well as information that contributes to societal welfare. Physical, psychological, social, and economic losses, invasion of privacy, and infringement of some basic human rights are all risks in a study. And these dangers and possible advantages occur to vary in multiple degrees. And so as a result, members of the American Psychological Association, also known as APA, they're required to undertake human participant research in strict compliance with applicable federal laws and regulations, including prior evaluation and approval by the IRB. And so yeah, they play a vital role in ensuring the rights and well-being of human research participants. Thank you. Okay, so I'm now on the 10th slide. Ethics and research, and the question was, why is ethical consideration in psychological research needed? And so what I said was, I explained that researchers have a moral obligation to keep research subjects safe. It doesn't matter what the topic is. Psychologists must remember to keep the participants and their well-being in mind. In other words, they owe it to the study participants to protect their rights and dignity. This implies that they must follow specific moral standards and behavior regulations. Sorry about that. So, yeah, for example, they must understand that what they're consenting to, and that means that they need to be given information on what the study is about, and they also need their informed permission. And the researchers should also avoid misleading participants about the nature of the research, unless there's no other option, and that's what they must do. And if that is being done, an independent expert needs to be there in order to approve of what's being done in the study, and they need to approve of the fact that some of the participants aren't fully aware of what's going on in the study. And one of the last ones that I wrote about was that participants and the data being obtained from them needs to remain anonymous at all times, because that's really important for their safety. And yeah, thank you.
This slide is APA Code of Conduct, and I'm going to be defining two of the general principles and apply them and make connections to the study. So the two principles that I chose to apply to the study would be principles B and E. The study is an experimental design regarding progressive muscle relaxation, excessive, and how it affects clinical stress and burnout levels amongst nursing student interns. I feel that principle B, which is fidelity and responsibility, definitely has an establishment between the relationship of nurse interns and those conducting the study, which was a properly established organization that reviewed and was supervising biomedical research to ensure that trust, acceptance, and responsibility were present between both parties, being the nurse interns and the researchers. I would apply study E to the study as well, because the participants had a complete free will and consent if they wanted to participate or if they didn't. An autonomous party, such as children, for example, in this study would need informed consent. And that party of people did not partake in this study.
So the APA Code of Conduct's ethical standards. So I will be discussing more than 3 ethical codes that were applied in the study. The first one I will be discussing is 8.1, the Institutional Review Board. They did get approval from the Ethics Committee. 8.3, before beginning the data, they had written consent from the institution and the participants. So they did get approval from participants, which were the interns, and the board, and also the clinic that they run the studies at. They got approval all throughout, and they were not even economically helped through the school or anything like that. They didn't receive any money to do these studies. 8.5, dispensing information consent. So we do have written consent for these interns. We also have the rotations that happen on the first day, so it is randomly assigned. The consent was there, and as they were actually in the room, you have the same young woman that has her PhD and is just playing an audio instruction, and also speaking to them, just to ease the pain, letting them know what is happening. They're consenting to this, they're fully aware of what is going on in this facility and what the procedure is going to be beforehand. One thing that did get a little bit compromised was 8.4, which is the getting like extra credit from a professor or things like that. So the experimental group was practice the PMR, but due to the timeline, they weren't able to get that. So they were graduating at this point because they exceeded the timeline of the procedure. It went longer than expected. So they didn't really get that PMRE training, but I don't believe that any of them went back to request it or anything like that. They just went about the rest of their lives. But the APA Code of Conduct was fully wholeheartedly used in this experiment. There were no flaws, no alarms to what was going on. Participants were aware of what was going on, what things would be applied to their life. When they got out of the clinic, they had like little homework assignment, and they had to communicate through WhatsApp, but there was contact throughout everything. There were professionals. You're in a actual clinic. You're not in like a scary, sketchy place. There is full communication. They were aware. There was consent. But yeah.
All right. So this was our presentations. Thank you so much for listening to us, and I hope you learned something new. Thank you for your time.